Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Metal, and I'm here today with Justin Chidester, founder of Wealth Mode Financial Planning. Justin focuses his practice and energy on serving young professionals and their families with what he calls to live in wealth mode, which I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what it means to live in wealth mode. I want to do that. So hook me up, Justin. I'm excited to have Justin on the show today because he takes a very balanced and I'd say different approach to financial planning, meaning that he doesn't just promote financial tools that he earns income from selling, but he gives a more broader philosophy and perspective. And we're going to dive into that a little bit today. And we're also going to talk about a couple of stories of families that were lopsided in their investment philosophy and how that ended up costing them significant losses. So I'm super excited about today's show and to interview Justin. Welcome to the show, brother. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week and woke up today, beautiful day here in Utah where you and I both are. And I thought this is going to be perfect.
Yeah, God has blessed us to be alive today. There's no doubt, man.
Yeah.
Look, let's jump right in. And I'm going to just ask the question that, could be on a lot of people's minds, which is, you are so young. That's the first thing I thought of when I went to your website. I mean, this guy's, I'd heard a couple of your podcasts before I saw a picture of you on your website. So I knew you were a smart dude. But when I went to your website, I'm like, man, this guy's so young. Why would we trust you with our financial planning? So let's just get that elephant out of the room. How would you answer that question?
I love that you put that one first, right? So I just turned 31 this week. So I'm no longer in my 20s, but I am in my 30s. So I'm starting to experience some of those things like I can't just eat a big bowl of ice cream before I go to bed and feel the same anymore, right? So I just want to mention that first of all. I am very young for an advisor. The average age of financial advisor is in late 50s, early 60s, actually. And despite my age, I do have 7 years of experience in the industry now, and have counseled, coached, and advised hundreds of families with my job experiences, and of course, private practice now for several years. I am a certified financial planner. That's something only 25% of all financial advisors out there have. It is what we are trying to promote as the gold standard for someone who really comprehensively understands finances. But I think one thing you're alluding to, especially with what you said in the intro, Josh, is that I'm a fee-only financial planner, and that's maybe, depending on who you ask, 5 to 10% of the industry practices that way. And then even within that space, I have what's called a flat fee approach. And at least for me, I feel like that's really important, and that creates a new and an extra level of trust that clients can have in me, because I basically talk to someone, get to know their situation, what they need advice on, and then we quote a few options of flat fee services that we can offer for them. And the beauty of that, and a lot of consumers maybe haven't really thought about this dynamic before, is that once that fee is decided and we decided something that's fair for what I'm going to advise you on, I have no incentive to provide advice that's going to put more money in my pocket. And most of the industry works in such a way where there are heavy incentives to advise a certain course of action, because there's going to be a commission on some kind of insurance or investment product. Or even if it is, a lot of fee-only advisors are asset managers, meaning the primary form of compensation is going to be, hey, I have these accounts, IRAs, taxable brokerage accounts, whatever they are, that I can manage for you if you just put the money here and I'll manage it and I'll take a percentage-based fee. And I think that arrangement is for sure heads and tails way better than someone trying to make a commission off of selling some product, and they're really representing a company and not your best interests. But there are still some conflicts of interest or misaligned incentives with the asset management format. And I think that is, what if a client comes to the table and says, hey, I'm really interested in taking a bunch of money to buy a practice or start a business. I work with my specialty, which I'll just lightly hit on, is young professionals that are 5 years or less out of a high student loan debt grad school. So these are healthcare professionals, physical therapists, chiropractors, dentists, lawyers, and they might work for someone for a few years, but then it might be a really good idea for them to start their own business or start their own practice, and that takes some capital, that takes some money. Well, an advisor, or the second situation, we might say, what if someone says, hey, I'm really interested in rental properties, real estate investments, I want to buy a duplex, or I want to have an Airbnb or whatever it is. Those are some great wealth building opportunities too. But the advisor that is solely an asset manager, even if they are comprehensively trained and say they're going to advise you on, the whole picture, not just your investments, they're going to want to maybe distract you from those ideas or say, here's why you might not want to start your business. Here's why real estate's really dangerous. And they may even kind of honestly think that, but the real problem in the background is that they're going to make more money if they can just convince you that the one and only place to build wealth is the stock market, where they're managing some accounts for you. And there's definitely a right and a wrong way to go about stock market wealth and compound growth on your assets there. And they're probably going to do that area really well. But what I've noticed, and I think part of why I've noticed this is because of the position I put myself in, to not be swayed or biased subconsciously about these other areas or opportunities for building wealth, is that I see significant merits in business ownership. You look at the wealthiest people in society and the most influential, that's because they own a business.
Right.
Or I've met people, and talked to them, for personal and professional interests about how they run their little real estate portfolio. And I see significant merits to both of those areas. And all these wealth building areas, I feel like, fall into these three broad areas of stock market wealth, business, and real estate. I mean, there's gurus out there all over the place saying this is the one way to do it. And they tend to fall into one camp, and they're super, got the blinders on about their area, and they always poo-poo the other two. But I see significant advantages in each of those areas. I think there's really good diversification if you have wealth in all three areas, to be honest, and they all offer certain tax benefits that the other two don't. So the philosophy that I have, and again, that I think it's actually a big reason why certain clients and consumers find me and say, I really like your approach. I can tell you're just going to advise me without any bias. And, the last advisor I interviewed, I mentioned how I want to have rental properties, and they were instantly, no, that, there's nothing good about that. It's dangerous. It's risky. And, the conversation that people have with me is so much different. It's open-ended, and it's, hey, how are you interested in building your wealth? Well, let's help you build a cohesive plan around how you're going to pursue those things, and it'll be customized to you. And I'm on board with it, because I'm not going to make more money whether you do real estate or whether you pump your stock market accounts. But maybe we'll do some of both, because there's diversification and merit to those. So I hope that thoroughly answered the question, Josh.
You did a masterful job. And what was coming up for me was, the book that teed me off to the difference in the different type of financial or wealth advisors was Unshakable from Tony Robbins. Did you ever read that book?
Yes. And it's he reached a lot of people. I have a lot of people ask about that book. In fact, both of his books, Money Master the Game and Unshakable.
Yeah, I made it about 300 pages into the 1,300 pages of Money Master the Game. I'm not going to lie. It was just a little too dense for me, but Unshakable is one that I would absolutely recommend. And, Tony did an extensive amount, I'll call it an expose. He did an extensive amount of research and then an expose of how financial advisors are paid, different loads, levels of how they're paid. And, his end thesis essentially was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, that the lowest cost plan that is in index funds and spread, not trying to beat the market, but across, diversified with the lowest cost, beats just about any other strategy. And I think you actually are bringing another dimension to that. I'm guessing you wouldn't disagree with that. But in addition to that, you're saying, but that's not the only quadrant, or that's not the only place we should play or consider. We should also consider what are the upside gains of being self-employed, including tax benefits, and what are the upside gains of real estate, including depreciation. And so you're taking what he is talking about in Unshakable and then basically spreading it across even more diverse asset classes and investment vehicles.
Absolutely. And yes, when we teach people, when I mentioned there's the right and wrong way to maybe play the stock market game, the right way that's been thoroughly researched and that Tony Robbins does teach and communicate quite well in his book is low cost passive vehicles for a diversified portfolio. And then, a professional, there's extra nuances to that to set it in a particular way that hopefully gives you a slightly extra edge, but it's definitely not about tactically trying to read and beat the market all the time. But yeah, you can go beyond that. And I think, there's a lot of education around investing in the stock market because it is the place that is easiest to access for the broad market of investors. You don't need as many dollars to start investing in the stock market as you need for your first real estate purchase or to start up a business. And so, for a lot of people, it's still going to be a major or a majority part of maybe their wealth building strategy, but having a certain allocation of their capital and their goals be toward, again, starting a business eventually, or, even having a side hustle.
Yeah.
Is an income diversification benefit, right? I mean, I think we all saw with COVID, people who thought they had really stable jobs in industries that they never needed to worry about. I mean, we saw anything from healthcare to hospitality to food service. I mean, we all just got surprised by that. And I think that's a good, easy thing to point to. Here's why you should have a side business set up, even if it's not your main thing, something that's already there that you can pivot to if something really shocking happens to your main source of income. So, yeah, that's right. The stock market, right and wrong way to do that. Very easily accessible to a lot of people. You should have some of your wealth and assets there, but the right thing for you may be to pursue real estate or business as part of your portfolio too.
Yeah. I love how you take the conflict out of your advice model. So kudos to you for that. Hey, I was coaching a group of teammates of mine, and we did a Zoom webinar last week, and there were 64 of us on the line, and it was really fun. I had an absolute blast. And we were talking about the decision of if it's right to buy real estate now or not. But one of the questions that came up that I want to pose to you is, what do you see as the most simplistic ingredients or steps of becoming financially free? And what I mean by financially free is you can live a reasonably comfortable life in retirement where you're not restrained on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis by a budget that's uncomfortable. So I don't mean billions. I mean, that'd be cool too. But what I'm really talking about is just someone that can have a retirement without fear. And so what do you see as the most simplistic, basic, fundamental ingredients to getting to that end destination that we all want to get to?
Yeah. People have asked a similar question before. They've even asked, like, what's the most important formula or equation in personal finance when you break it all down? And this isn't groundbreaking, but maybe there's a slight twist on this little formula I'm about to give that I think is kind of important. One, it's income. I guess a lot of people, I'll say what most people say first, to income minus spending equals saving. Like, that's what money's all about. And you don't go anywhere. You can make $1 million a year, right? But if there's no savings, you're actually not headed anywhere at all, right? As far as your net worth and what you're valued. So a lot of people say income minus spending rate equals savings rate. But that's the mentality that's you spend something and then you live on what's left. Mm-hmm. And that's what leads people to go years and even decades without actually saving or investing anything significant. So it's just the algebra of it. Let's flip the order. Income minus your savings rate, which you do first, equals what you get to spend.
Love that.
Around. And, we've heard this adage and some rules of thumb people say, some people teach pay yourself first, meaning the second you get your paycheck or your income, sock some away first and then live on what's left. Don't make the mistake of flipping that and saying, well, I'll spend some stuff on what I need and hopefully sock away what's left over. Just for a lot of people, that's like the one little mistake that then gets repeated and habitualized over their lifetime, and they don't go anywhere. So I mean, that sounds really simple, but you have to enact some kind of discipline, I think, where you just stick it away the second you get it. That would be the most basic starting formula.
I don't think we need to get it any more complicated. Let me just add on a couple of psychological nuances that I see with that. When you put the formula in that way, income minus savings rate equals what you are able to spend, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's a play on one of the commandments from the richest man in Babylon, right? Thou shalt save 10% first or something like that.
Yeah.
And what that does is that formula makes it so you have to have a savings vehicle. And I know that's kind of like a duh comment, but what I see people do, what I observe them do, is they earn the income, they spend, and then they don't know what to do with the money left over. And there's like an indecisiveness there. Well, we'll just let it sit in the checking account. And then I feel rich. And then I have a moment where I want to go to Hawaii, and I go to Hawaii. And so inserting that piece first makes you take action. And one of the things we were talking about in this group is, I really don't care if it's 1%, if your saving rate's 1%. Just get the trickle started, because what'll happen is at the end of a year, you'll look at the 1% or the end of 6 months and you'll go, that's more money than I thought it was. Maybe I could do 3%. A year, you'll go, geez, that's a lot more money than I thought it is. I wonder if I could do 10%. So the important thing to me, and my advice that I was giving, was just start. Get a separate account, whatever that vehicle is, start putting some money in there, watch it grow, learn from your investments, and watch it grow over time. But that concept of paying yourself first is probably the most fundamental forerunner for wealth. I love that.
Yeah. I love that nuance you added. It's true. If the first thing you do with your money is saving, then it does force you to just take action on whatever the savings vehicle is. Whereas you're right, a lot of people that save last, spend first, save what's left. It's so much easier at that point to default to just spending it anyway, instead of finding the savings vehicle.
100%. Cool. Love that. Thank you very much for that. So let's pivot. We talked about two really interesting stories about two affluent families that were overweighted in one asset class or another. Mm-hmm. And eventually, it dramatically damaged their economic well-being, because they ran into a market dip in that particular segment, and they weren't able to survive in the same fashion that they would have, hoped or been able to if they were more diversified. So let's kick this off. And if you don't mind, Justin, I'll go with the story that I mentioned to you first, and then you can tell the equally fascinating other side. So, one of the things that I was blessed as a kid is that my grandparents came out of the Depression, delivered newspapers. My grandpa, when he was 11 years old, his father died, and it was him and a couple of sisters, and he became the breadwinner for the family at 11. And he, over years and years and years of saving and investing, and luckily grandma was there to make him actually save the money instead of just spend the money on horses and cars. But he all of his money, all of his wealth, all of his life energy went into real estate. It's the only thing they knew. And I think they did a tremendous amount of things right, but there was a moment where they had reached retirement, and they had sold a 90-unit apartment building that they had built. They were a landscaper. When they retired from landscaping, they decided to turn the land that they had their nursery on into, it was free and clear at that point, into an apartment building. And they eventually sold that apartment building and then carried back a note in second position. Well, that property changed hands multiple times. And eventually the owner that it had changed hands to, and they continued to just roll the note to different owners. Eventually that owner hit hard times and they defaulted on the note. They pocketed all the rents that were coming in. They quit doing the landscaping and all the things to keep up the property, and basically just ran the property into shambles. So at that moment, my grandparents' wealth was all in real estate. Their main source of income dried up, and they had to take that property back and bring capital in, take over the management, catch up the first mortgage note, pay for attorney's fees, and get this, this asset moving back. Well, at that moment, unfortunately, the real estate industry as a whole, the real estate market as a whole, was in kind of the doldrums. It was one of those downturns. And so they sold a piece of land in Arizona to the same realtor who sold them. They sold it to the same one who represented them when they bought the land. Well, come to find out, and it was a fire sale deal. They basically called them up and said, hey, we don't have any real plans for this. Could you get us our money back? We need it in 2 weeks. Ends up selling the property back to that realtor. And 60 days later, that realtor sells that piece of land to Hilton Hotels for $2 million more than what he just bought the land from my grandparents from. And so I saw this, this family that had grown out of the Depression, worked their entire lives in this, self-employed landscaping business, which is not easy work, right? It's, up and out before the sun comes up and home after the sun comes down. And they had amassed this wealth all centered in real estate, and one downturn probably cut the net worth of the family. Think of it this way. It reduced the savings of the life energy of the family, because that's what money is. It's the savings of our life energy. It cut their life energy savings by probably 50%.
Oh, man.
And I think about, okay, how do I not repeat that mistake? And how do I get money in different places? Because eventually one of these asset classes is going to have turmoil. And that's the time I'm going to need to land on the other. So that's been a formative story to me. And maybe we'll flush out like, okay, what did we learn from that? And how would we do it different after you share your story? But anyways, that's grandma and grandpa's story. And I'm really proud to share it because I think we can all learn from it. So I'll turn it over to you, buddy.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot to learn from your family story. And I think a lot to learn from this one too. This one, unfortunately, has I wouldn't say there was any sort of happy ending to losing 50% of your life energy or something, but it sounds like they still had a base left to go forward with. I mean, that hurts a lot in many ways. This, unfortunately, is a story of someone that pretty much lost it all. So I had the difficult experience at one point in my professional career, sitting in front of a couple that was mid-60s. And I was counseling them because they were in some financial dire straits. This was before my private practice days. And I always, as I always did, I asked the people in front of me, what brought you in here today that you're talking with me? And they told one of the most interesting life journeys that I'd heard up to that point. So this senior couple, the husband, his entire life, entire career, had some form of a construction company. I can't remember exactly what it was, but everything that they ever did was building wealth in that business. And I think he even acquired other companies at some points, and very wealthy, always had a really good income, but they never invested anything or saved anything in the stock market or in basic savings vehicles, really, beyond some minimal cash reserves. They never invested in other real estate. If they did, it was tied to the business, right? And they were literally in their early 60s and building their dream log cabin home for retirement in Idaho. And after that was done, he was going to sell the business, all its assets, entirely everything, and live off the proceeds for just living the dream, right? Just calling it quits. But of course, his cardinal sin was that he never diversified outside of his own business. And quick aside, we meet people like this, don't we? That say, I can't trust anything that I'm not 100% in control of. So I'm going to be a business owner. And, they think about all the fears they have if they owned real estate or if they had money in the stock market, everything that could go wrong. And they say, well, that's part of why it goes wrong is because it's not in my control. And if it's in my control, I'll always make sure that it'll be okay. Well, this was definitely this guy's line of thinking. And I think I even stole some of his verbiage there as for why he had been that way as he was telling this story. Well, it was on one of the final shipment of logs over to building this dream cabin. Wow. Where there was some kind of workplace accident. I don't know, like chains broke something. And basically 3 or 4 workers were just crushed. Oh. One might have even died. I can't remember, but long story short, major lawsuit, this enough to the point where the liability limits on all his business coverage was exceeded. And basically he lost all his wealth. Oh. The business was basically, he couldn't sell it for anything or hardly anything. He was basically left with his primary home since, as whatever wealth he had. So that's basically all they had. I mean, luckily he was mortgage free in retirement, but it was that and his Social Security checks.
Oh my gosh.
And they did not finish the dream cabin. But I mean, they would just move to some smaller, more modest house for retirement. I mean, it was devastating to hear, but I've since seen all the ways that business owners, even if most of your wealth is the business, I've since learned and seen a lot of the strategies and ways that you can You can obviously, once you hit a certain point, stop funneling everything back in the business and start putting some elsewhere. I mean, you can set up stock market retirement plans as a business owner that have really high contribution limits. Like you can sock away 50 or 100,000 a year in stock market accounts pre-tax if you're a business owner. Stuff, kind of strategies and limits that the rest of us don't have access to, where maybe we're just capped to putting 20,000 a year in our 401k. You can do much higher. So he could have had the chance to do that. He could have had a chance to maybe purchase some personal real estate investments instead of buying another construction brand or company to bring under his business hood. But he never did. He never went outside of that. And obviously these are extreme stories, and people do hear them and I think people tend to respond in really binary ways. So they either think, oh gosh, yeah, that's why I'm never going to be a business owner. That's why I'm never going to invest in real estate because of what happened to Josh's grandparents or whatever. Or they respond with, but that'll never happen to me. I mean, how often does something like that happen? And I think both are mistakes, right? Because part of what we're trying to do with good broad diversification is just to assure and make sure we don't end up being that extraneous story that, yeah, seems a little bit like an anomaly, but that's what risk management is. Mm-hmm. Do something simple that keeps you from facing the worst possible outcome that's out there.
Mm-hmm. You hit on binary thinking, and this is something that I've had to check myself on in my investing career. I thought I either have to be all in or all out, and that is so not the case. I can be 25% in and 75% out. In fact, I can be 25% in here and 25% over there and 50% out. And I think it's the same way when we talk about the lack of diversification. We have to be maniacally focused with all of our assets in real estate. We have to be all of our money in index funds, except then we see a 50 or 60% correction every 10 or 15 years, and we're nearing retirement and we sell at the bottom. We have to be 100% in our business. And this really comes back to psychology, that when we think we're right, we want to see reasons and reaffirm for ourselves, self-affirming reasons why we're right. And as we seek to self-affirm our opinion, we tend to go deeper down that rabbit hole of just doing that thing. Oh, see that article? I'm right. I have to be all in. And so I think this actually starts at a psychological level to say, I don't have to believe everything I think. There's just as many factors out there that might tell me that my all in should be an all out. And I can be in 50% or 75% and still have 25% otherwise. So I think this is almost like a human evolutionary psychological error in our mental thinking that we have to check ourselves in. And even if we're 100% sure we're right, we don't have to go all in. We can go 50% in or 75% in and have some balance and some insurance on the other side.
There is a ton of wisdom in what you just said. And it definitely is, it's got to be some kind of human nature. Because even though I know better don't get stuck in binary thinking, I'll still have client conversations where the client will ask me a question like, hey, we've already invested enough for this and saved enough for that, and we still have some excess. Should we start paying extra on our mortgage or should we invest? Okay, so there's a very binary dilemma that we confront a lot in personal finance. Right. And and then I'll find myself, without realizing, I'll start crunching the numbers for each and explaining why, and trying to find the optimal path for each one. And then I'll stop and say, and catch myself and realize, oh wait, I just got stuck in that too. And I say, well, how about some of both, and whether that's in the form of taking the excess and still splitting it, or saying, hey, listen, client, you are already saving and investing a lot. So maybe that was the time to take a step and do some extra debt payoff. And then you're doing some of both. But it's absolutely true. What you're saying rings true. It's
funny how you just framed that up, because in the seminar or the training that I did this week for our teammates, there was the question of, should I pay off debt? Should I invest? Should I put money in the 401k in the 529? Which way should I go? And my answer was yes. Because you don't have to, you can slice the pie in more pieces and put them in different places and take ground in different directions, as long as there's a savings rate and as long as you're putting that money somewhere, you don't have to decide this or that. You can do this and that. Mm. And I feel as soon as I've made that awareness, it's made my investing so much easier because it takes the stress off. Like I don't have to be right anymore. I just have to go, both of these over a long term are going to get me where I want to go. And I don't know which one for sure is going to get me faster, because I don't know if the stock market's going to take a 50% correction tomorrow. But if I move down both paths at the same time, I'm definitely going in the direction that I want to go. So that playing with our minds on the binary thinking is a really interesting thing. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And I've actually got to jump in and say something that comes to mind with what you said. I think one paradigm shift that we train our clients to think about is that when you do decide to do this and that kind of mentality instead of a this or that mentality, you're right. When you say this or that, you are splitting it in a couple different directions with your money or whatnot. But here's the thing, you will always be able to look back, won't you? And people always want to measure their financial decisions this way. They want to look back with hindsight bias and say, I should have done this instead, right? If something goes south or something doesn't do as well as you thought, people always want to say, they make the mistake of thinking the lesson to be learned is, I should have just done the other thing instead. Okay, but obviously results are important. Like when we make a decision with money, with a certain investment or something, obviously we want it to perform well. But the ultimate way we need to measure our financial decisions across our life is how well we followed good principles first. And secondly, did we get the intended result? I hope that makes sense, because again, diversification always means you have to say you're sorry. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before, whether it's in, sometimes we'll talk about it just in terms of the stock market, right? Like people say, but I really feel like this one company or this one area of the market or this industry is going to do really well. Whether it's cryptocurrency or tech or biotech or whatever, people always think there's some hot sector or stock and they are bought in, but the right principle is to diversify. Okay, so maybe you split off some of your money and you do diversify and you still buy other things. But then if you watch that industry or that stock or whatever you thought was going to be really good, if you watch that take off, you're going to want to turn around and say, I should have done that. I shouldn't have diversified. I should have just put all my money in that, right? But that's not the right way to measure your decision. I know the result looks really good, but you can still make a bad decision and get a good result. Can't you? So that's why we have to measure first by, did we follow good principles? And then secondly, measure and say, did we get the intended results we want? And if needed, maybe adjust from there.
Super well said. I love that. I love that thinking. It's funny how, financial freedom is so linked to psychology. It's all overcoming fear and greed to make good decisions and get to the desired end path or goal. This has been fun. Okay, so let's go back to these two stories, right? And what we're talking about, and we could easily tell a third story of somebody that had all their money in their company's stock, or all their money in cryptocurrency and was forced to sell out in emotion out of fear at the bottom of the bottom of a crash. So let's talk about, how do we prevent this? Let's go there, Justin.
How do we prevent this one asset class thinking?
Yeah. How do we prevent this being pigeonholed into one asset class and succumbing to selling at the bottom when there's some, capitulation in the market and everybody's just fleeing for fear?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, if you find yourself really gravitating toward thinking that one of these three areas is the only and surefire way for you to build wealth, recognize that you're falling right into the confirmation bias stuff that Josh just talked about. Proactively maybe turn off, I have clients come in all the time and just, hey, I'm really interested. I think all I want to do is real estate. I'm not really big about the stock market. I had some bad experience that traumatized me, and I never want to do that again. Well, the first thing I do is to tell them to turn off all their content digestion about real estate and go learn a little bit more. I'll give them a book about the stock market, one that I know will teach them in the right way. And this lesson expounds to so much more than money, right? Like we get so caught in our own ways of thinking with our political beliefs or our own belief systems, and expose yourself to other ideas and see and have an open mind, first of all, and see how that starts to change your perception. But if you do find yourself all the way caught in one area and you're already there, then you may have to, I'm just going to say it, you may have to make a kind of gutsy decision about diversifying. That may not be easy. It may mean that you don't take the next progression or step in your business that you wanted to take because it's time to split off a piece and do it somewhere else. If all you have is real estate, it might mean it's time to sell a property and put that money somewhere else. So, I don't know if that answered it well, whether it's for someone that's already, deep in only one of these areas or trying to start their path and trying to decide. But those are a couple thoughts that I would give.
I think you nailed it. I love the idea of educating yourself on the other side of the equation. In other words, if you're 100% certain, start reading and studying the things that you're 0% certain about and see if some of that might resonate and balance you out. I think that's probably the best answer you could have given to it. In hindsight, the lesson that I pulled out of my grandparents' experience was that they picked the right vehicle. Like they used leverage debt to buy cash flow producing properties, and then they held on to them for 50 years. Anybody who does that is going to become wealthy. You are, as long as it's cash flow producing and you can wait out the ups and downs. The slight misstep to that was they were 100% into that strategy. And had they had 10% of their wealth in stocks or stocks and bonds or something more liquid, that could have got them through and helped the other 90% of their assets survive. So
Sure.
It's both great lessons. And I know there's somebody listening to this that is 100% in on cryptocurrency or some
Right.
or some asset class that's going, I wonder if they're talking about me. We're talking to you. Oh, dude. All right. This has been a blast. So we've talked a lot about risk, and I think we hit something that was so incredibly important. And thanks for sharing that, really heartfelt story. Let's pivot just a little bit. What do you think the number one reason why people fail to succeed with their personal finances? What's the fatal flaw that you keep seeing coming up?
I hope this is a insightful and maybe somewhat creative answer. Hopefully I can articulate this logic chain here. So this question of success, right, or failure, we often say that success is personally defined, right? There's no one measure to success. So I think on the flip side, there's no maybe one measure of failure either.
I'm with you.
But one objective form of failure in money or personal finance is to hit any point in the future where you no longer have the resources to fund even just your needs, right? I think that would be when we think long-term and what we're trying to do with our money, right? It's like the opposite of financial independence, right? Or financial freedom is, I've completely failed at that long-term objective of maybe being able to not work and maybe not even have the resources just to even have my needs met. Okay, so that would be some form of failure. How do people get there if they do? Because I've seen it. Like I alluded to the story of the senior couple. That was actually a job where I counseled often with people who were kind of at retirement age, but didn't have any resources for one reason or another, right? Most of them were coming in with some dramatic story of losing their business right before retirement, like that one couple, but most of them, it was some form of, I just never saved anything, right? I was always living paycheck to paycheck and off of everything that I'd ever made. So I would ponder that a lot. I've thought about that a lot. Like, how do people get there to that somewhat objective form of financial failure, if we're going to put it a little harshly? Yes, it's because they didn't save enough, but then we have to ask, why didn't they save? And I think honestly, for even just regular, everyday, modest workers, there's this concept called lifestyle creep. And I don't know if that term is something that our listeners have heard. I think we use a lot as advisors, because we've just noticed that when people get any sort of income increase in their life, the default is just to spend it, right? Just to spend it. And it's this micro little thing, but the second a client emails me and says, hey, guess what, Justin, I got this new job, or I got this promotion, or I got a raise, but sometimes even instead of waiting till their next quarterly meeting with me, I meet with my clients on a quarterly schedule. I say, hey, can we have a quick call? And the first thing I want to do is I want to have them change the direct deposit on their paycheck so that at least some of that raise is saves. Because if I even take 2 or 3 months to see them again, that just becomes new spending. They've always, they've picked up they've bought a side-by-side, or they bought some new toy and now they have a new loan payment. It'll go somewhere. So I think the number one reason, honestly, that like most everyday Americans fail to succeed in personal finance is they can't just save some of their income increases, because it's really hard to start now if you're already spending everything that you make to start putting some away. If you can, great. But honestly, the easiest way to start doing that is something I think you kind of already mentioned earlier today, is just to start small and start building up. And if you think about it, if someone gets a 10% raise and every time they get that, they save at least half of it, you'd be surprised over the span of a life cycle how quickly you actually get up to a pretty high savings rate, if you're just willing to take that kind of approach. So lifestyle creep, honestly, is this hidden phantom force that I think, because no one gets to retirement and saying, hey, I actually intentionally didn't save anything for retirement, right? Like no one made that conscientious decision. So it happened in some kind of unconscious way. And I think it's lifestyle creep. Like people they just let spending happen to them.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. And what was coming up for me was, right or wrong, people get their sense of self-worth and happiness from external events. When I get that job, I'll be happy, because then I'll get to buy that car and then I'll be happy. And then they get there and they're like, gosh, I thought I'd be a lot happier. I'm not, I need my boss's boss, or I need to be number one, or I need to, now if I had that house, then I'd be happy. And then they get there and somebody has a bigger house. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they're not happy. And so if we can just be aware that is human existence to some extent or another. You may suffer from that less or more than others, but that external source of happiness is robbing our financials as a society, keeping up with the Joneses. And so if we can become aware of that and go, all right, what do I need to be happy right now? Like I was just thinking before this podcast, I need to get out on my mountain bike in the sunshine, right? I mean, we got to figure out what is it that creates happiness for us now, not at some future point at time when we get or when we have, but how do we create happiness with what we have? So that was the first thing that came up for me. The second thing that came up for me is that what I've learned is I've seen myself on that same path. And then, in all the mistakes we've spoken about, I suffer from those or have suffered from those. And I'm recovering. I'm recovering. And what I realized was that now I've lost my train of thought where the heck I'm going with this. Oh, yes. Okay. Jeez. I went straight to mountain biking, and everything after that was a blur. Sorry, Justin.
No, your mind hopped on that mountain bike.
Oh
right?
My gosh, I'm literally out the door. No, where I was going with that was, when you start saving, that can actually become a really gratifying thing to look at and to watch. Here's the goal. Here's where I want to end up. I've got a written plan, and every month I am getting gratification for taking a step down that path. And so you can shift your gratification. You can shift your happiness from, when I get there, I'll be able to buy this thing and then I'll be happy, to, I have a plan and I'm taking steps and I'm getting that same feeling of self-gratification. In fact, it's really a lot bigger feeling of self-gratification by executing the plan and getting there. So savings can take the place of the happiness that people receive from spending, is where I'm going with that. Have you seen that? Have you seen people make that transition?
Yes. And what floated through my mind when you said that is that, again, lifestyle creep is succumbing to this immediate gratification mindset that can easily pervade our human nature, right? And but I have totally seen people make this mindset switch, and even though it's this like little, sometimes even like kind of like corny thing, and it's like I feel like I do so many things that are really valuable for my clients, as far as like helping them set up their portfolio in the right way, help them intentionally save toward the vacation home or investment property they want, or gives tax planning guidance that saves them a lot of taxes. Like that's all objectively valuable stuff. But behaviorally, like the thing that some of my clients love the most is that my favorite part of working with you is when you show us what our net worth was 3 years ago, and then show us when we start working with you and what it is today. Because the lifestyle stuff that you can spend on gives you some immediate gratification right now. But unless you're measuring the impact of the savings and trying to switch your attitude to that, we're not really good at seeing the progress in ourselves, are we? Because we're with ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
So like each month, it just doesn't feel like you're doing anything. But if you could stand up and look back at where you were and then compare it to today, it's a small thing, but you really do need to take those moments, because those are the moments where you get some significant satisfaction out of the what did you call it? Gratification out of saving. You have to measure it. If you're not measuring it, guess what? You're doing a good behavior, but you may not have any of that feeling of accomplishment happen for it. You may just, and I know a lot of people who have never been savers before and only been spenders, they say that there's no fun in savings. Like, what am I doing this for? It doesn't seem like anything's happening. So if you teach people to measure it and measure their progress, it's a small thing, but my clients love it. I can see sometimes that's where they come back and say, wow, when you showed us for the first time how much our net worth has increased in the last year, just a year, right? It's like, that got us super hyped. We'd like to save the entire, these are clients that I never thought would say this, but next time we get our annual bonuses, we just want to save all of it. That felt so good for you to tell us the progress that we've made. So yeah, it's funny you say that. It's like, sometimes clients say, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad, but like, what about all these other awesome things that I'm doing for you? Like, do you like that part of it too? But no, people just love the net worth measurement.
Well, the spending, I'm just trying to, phrase this in a different way. The spending, or the external source of search of the external source of happiness, it's like a sugar high. It tastes really good for 5 minutes. It feels really good for a few days. And then you're left empty and feeling crashed. And the opposite choice is the hard choice. Income minus savings rate equals what you can spend is the more difficult path, but that path creates pride. That path creates self-worth. That path creates internal happiness, because you're actually making a sacrifice for now for something that's going to benefit you later. And that is empowering, it's energetic, and it's the path that now I might have just figured this out on my own. Is that the wealth mode path? What does wealth mode mean? I need to know that before the end. I felt like I was getting close there.
No, I think that's definitely a part of it. To me, wealth mode, this is just how I define my phrase, right? And the namesake of my business is the state of being where you fully enjoy the present or today, while still feeling like you're fully taking care of tomorrow. Cool. I think people live at the expense. I think people live often at the extreme ends of the spectrum of spending everything that they make because they can only live for today, right? Like the YOLO mindset default, right? But there's people out there who can't enjoy today. They're so worried about if they don't save enough for tomorrow that they are just extreme savers. I mean, I actually run into that quite a bit, because a lot of those extreme savers realize I save and I save and I save, and I'm not sure what to do with it. So I better work with an advisor, right? So I actually have that mindset coming in a lot too. There is a sweet spot in the middle where, yes, you are getting a fair and reasonable amount of immediate gratification, satisfaction from what your money's doing today. But it's like you said, our appetites are insatiable. It's really easy to binge on a new spending high or lifestyle high and then go chasing for the next big thing. So people live at the extremes ends of the spectrum. I feel like what we do as financial planners, or at least the way I define my job, is when we kind of do a financial outlook and lay out a path. for the rest of someone's life about what they want to achieve with their money. The end result, if we break that all down to what that means for them today, right now, even though there's all these long-term things we're trying to plan for, is getting to tell a client, here's how much you need to save to reach all those future things. And thus, here's how much you get to have fun with now. And for some people, the fun part especially is when I say that amount you can have for now is more than what you're doing right now. But then it gives people tons of confidence and assurance, like, wow, I can enjoy this now. And I can do more stuff with my kids because I'll never get these years back while they're growing up, or just whatever it is, to allow people to find that sweet spot between, we might say current consumption and future consumption, or current spending and future saving, or current spending and future spending, because all savings is just, it's for future spending, right? Yeah. In the end. So to me, that's how I define what wealth mode is it's kind of, the process we go through is trying to bring clients into a state of mind where they're no longer worried and feeling not confident about how much they should spend versus save. And they know exactly why we're doing things the way they are. It's going to optimize satisfaction across the lifespan.
I love it. That was a better definition of wealth mode than I thought you were going to come up with. So I think that's a perfect place to end. And bro, seriously, I can tell you're going to do a lot of good in this world. You're going to help a lot of people. So thanks for what you're doing out there. I'm super grateful for it. And I know people are going to want to find more about you and what you do. So drop us a couple of different places where people can connect with you, and maybe also, hear you on a couple different podcasts, because I listened to a podcast or two of yours and there was some real good wisdom in there. So how can people find you?
Yeah, for sure. So if you're interested in getting in touch with me and my team and just having a comfortable conversation about how we might work together, you can go to my website, www.wealth-mode.com. Everything's really transparent on there. It's going to be different from maybe any other search you've had about an advisor. So all our services, our pricing, how everything works, it's on there, but we can just have a basic free intro consultation to discuss your situation more and find out if it's a good fit. You'll find scheduling links on the website for that. Other places where I've had interviews would be FI, the PA Way is the name of one podcast I recently did an interview on. The AFCPE podcast and the Alain Guillot show. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. He's French Canadian, so I don't speak French. But those are all some interviews I've done in the past, and I think on each of them I've discussed a slightly different set of ideas or different things. So I think there's a unique conversation to be had with each of those. And Josh, you've definitely created a conversation that I've really enjoyed, and I've been able to speak about some things and some opinions and ideas that I haven't had the chance to publicly share before in this kind of format. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It was an absolute blast. We will find the links to those podcasts that you talked about, and we'll put them in the description. So if anybody's listening, check out the description for those. We'll also put a link to Justin's website. And whenever we run over on time, I know it was a rad interview. So thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you. Thanks for listening to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcast and Spotify to be notified of all future episodes, and follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Neo Home Loans and how we empower home buyers with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom, visit neohomeloans.com.